that. Joining me live to talk about some scenarios ahead, former Pennsylvania representative and 2010 Democratic Senate candidate as well, Joe Sestak. Always good to see you.
Good to see you, Craig.
Right now, ideas are being debated behind closed doors, and you suggest that we shouldn't be talking so much about a fiscal cliff per se, that we should instead be talking about a bunny slope. Describe what you think should happen.
Well, we know that the fiscal cliff means we're taking $700 billion out of our economy on spending because of the tax increases and government spending cuts. If that happens, like a skier going over a cliff, our economy is going to hit rock bottom. We're going to have zero growth over 2013. We will have, by the end of 2014, double-digit unemployment. Millions of Americans will lose their employment. So what you want to do is change the scale of that fiscal cliff to a gentle, let's say, bunny slope. We have a fragile economy, but it's accelerating. It's predicted, as this year, to grow, it grew 2%, to grow at 3% or more this coming year. So you want this skier, so to go down a gentle slope and pick up speed to accelerate, so that when you do come to the grand bargain, hopefully by February, that has $3 trillion of debt reduction, that's done in the following 9 years, where our economy is so strong it can shoulder that burden. All they've got to do is find about $100 to $200 billion of debt reduction this year, changing the scale, and put the rest of that in the following 9 years. And I think that's what they're going to come up with.
Where will they find it?
Well, there's various places you could do. Just that, for example, there's $118 billion if you didn't do the payroll tax extension holiday. You could find, if you just taxed those over $250,000 and extended their Bush tax cuts, that's almost the same equivalent amount. Or if you wanted to step back and say, hey, let's make sure that these defense and domestic sequestration cuts of $100 billion are only half of that. You could take small pieces of that and come up with $100 to $200 billion, which means that our economy will still grow close to 3%. That's the key. And that's why they're behind closed doors, I think, today. Coming up with that, you don't have to have it either done by 1 January either, Craig. You could have the outlines of that and nail it down the following first 2 weeks in January as the Treasury Department steps back. Pardon me?
And have it take effect retroactively.
Absolutely, because the Treasury Department doesn't have to change the tax withholding schedules if it knows that the policymakers are finally coming to some agreement.
Joe, I didn't mean to cut you off there. You just mentioned the payroll tax, and we've heard a lot of talk about the payroll tax holiday that was supposed to be temporary. It appears as if that's going away as part of any plan. Is that safe to say?
I think that may very well be part of it. Look, it hits the middle class, but the bottom line is that money is supposed to be going into Social Security, and we're paying it by other means. So eventually we've got to come back to that. If you just did that $120 billion, that would bring us down to about a 2.8% GDP growth next year. Now, it doesn't just have to be that. I think the wiser method is to actually have some sort of agreement of the more wealthy, those who are earning over $400,000 to $500,000, and do a compromise, principal compromise with Senator McConnell of saying, hey, that will be a significant part of the money. We do want some spending cuts, so we'll take a little bit out of the domestic and defense programs, but not that much, and maybe a piece of that, like payroll tax holiday. But you've got to extend the alternative minimum tax. That means 30 million Americans, as you just mentioned a little earlier, will be hit with $3,000 of tax increase. And the problem is that consumer confidence had risen up until the last couple weeks. We have our investors flush with $4 trillion of money to invest, but they're all holding back because of uncertainty. But if they see our economy is growing this year, and then they come to the grand bargain in February, we're off and we're running.
Don't get off the sidelines. Last question here really quickly. What happens to the estate tax?
Yes, I think you're going to see the principal compromise where it's going to be about $3 to $4 million. The first of that amount is going to be tax exempt. It won't be the $5.5 million that Speaker Boehner wanted to. It may not be the 3.5 that President Obama proffered. Somewhere in between. Look, we came so close. Speaker Boehner and the President came almost within $500 billion of the $3 trillion they wanted to have for debt reduction, and they just couldn't complete it. I believe both policymakers want to do what's right for the America's economy, and they will reach that grand compromise by February before the debt ceiling has to be risen. But this small step, not to go with a fiscal cliff, but to have that bunny slope, the accelerated economy, has to be done first.
All right, Joe Sestak, author of a coming book, The Bunny Slope. Thank you. Appreciate you as always. Still to come here, training teachers to take